Introducing God's Plan, Chapter 6. Moses leads the people of Israel out of Egypt. After many, many years, a foreign king came and took over Egypt. This foreign king then became the new Pharaoh, but as he didn't know of Joseph, and as he was a hard man, he was not pleased that there were so many people of Israel living in Egypt. He decided to make them all slaves to the Egyptians and to treat them very badly. Later, this new Pharaoh decided that he didn't want the number of the people of Israel to grow any larger. He ordered that all the Israelite baby boys should be thrown into the river Nile to drown them just after they were born. However, God was still with the people of Israel, and just as he had led them safely into Egypt, he now had a plan which would lead them safely out of Egypt, to freedom once again. One boy was saved from drowning. His mother put him into a little basket and floated him on the river in the hope that someone would find him and look after him safely. Well, the daughter of the Pharaoh herself found the little baby and decided she would save him. She called the baby Moses. And so Moses was saved from death, and he was brought up as an Egyptian, and he lived in the palace and grew up among the royal family. When Moses grew up, God chose him to lead his people. Moses loved God, but he was a quiet man who was meek and humble. And so when God chose him to lead his people, at first Moses made many excuses, as he thought that there must be someone better than himself to do God's work. But God knew that Moses was the right man to choose, and so Moses finally agreed. One day, God led Moses to the mountain of Horeb, where he saw a brightly burning bush. From the middle of the burning bush came a loud voice. It spoke to Moses and told him that he would be the one to set all the people of Israel free from Egypt. This was God's voice. God told Moses to go to the Pharaoh of Egypt and asked him to let the people go. God knew that the Pharaoh of Egypt would not like the idea of letting the people go because they were good slaves to the Egyptians. But God was on their side and would help Moses to free his people from suffering and slavery. And so Moses went to the Pharaoh of Egypt and asked him to let the people of Israel go. When the Pharaoh would not agree to do so, God gave Moses the power to change all the water of Egypt to blood. And so Moses changed all the rivers, the lakes, the streams and pools into blood. There was no fresh water to be found anywhere. Pharaoh was surprised at this, but although he was troubled by this miracle, he still did not let the people of Israel go free. And so Moses went to Pharaoh again and asked him to let his people go. And again Pharaoh would not agree to do this. So this time God helped Moses bring a plague of frogs to the land of Egypt. There were so many frogs that the whole land of Egypt was covered with them, and they were everywhere. It was a horrible plague. However, Pharaoh would still not agree to free the people of Israel. Well, Moses went to him again to ask for permission to let his people go, and this happened many times, and each time Pharaoh hardened his heart against the people of Israel. God helped Moses to bring another plague to the land of Egypt. The third plague was one of many lice, which came and crawled over every person and every animal living in Egypt. And then came the fourth plague. Millions of flies swarmed everywhere and made everything black. During the fifth plague, the animals came sick and died. And the sixth plague came, and everyone in Egypt broke out in boils so they could hardly stand up. And then came the seventh plague, where thunder and hail were sent from the sky, and the hail was so heavy that the people and the animals outside were killed. The eighth plague was locusts. There were so many locusts that they ate everything in Egypt. They ate every tree and every bush and every flower and every blade of grass and all the crops. When they finally went away, there was no vegetation left at all. And then came the ninth plague of a thick darkness. It was so dark that no one could see anything at all for 3 days. Everyone stayed in their own homes. The sun did not appear, and it was like the blackest of black nights for 3 whole days. These plagues were very terrible, but the Pharaoh was such a wicked and stubborn man that he deserved all these plagues. He would not believe in God nor listen to him, and he would not let the people of Israel go. Even when all these plagues were over, Pharaoh still had a hard heart. He still would not let the people of Israel go out of Egypt to worship God. All these plagues proved that God was the true God of the earth, as these plagues attacked the things which the Egyptians worshipped. The Egyptians worshipped their great river, the Nile, but God had turned it into blood. They also worshipped the sun, but God turned everything to darkness for 3 days. This showed that there was no other God but him, the true God. He could control the sun and the rivers. There is only one God, and he is the only one to be worshipped. The Egyptians also worshipped the Pharaoh and believed him and his firstborn son to be gods. God did not want people to worship other people, and neither did he want them to worship the rivers or the sun or animals or anything else. He wanted everyone to worship him. He is the only true God. He created all things, and so he's the only one who should be worshipped. So after all these plagues, God was sad that Pharaoh still would not let his chosen people, the people of Israel, go out of Egypt to worship him. At last, God came to the most terrible plague of all. He told Moses to tell all the people of Israel to kill a lamb. Every family was to kill 1 lamb and to put the blood on their doors outside. And he told them all to do this on the same day. Then that night, all the families throughout the whole of Egypt were visited by God, and the doors which had blood on them he passed over. But in the houses where the doors had not been smeared with blood, he killed the firstborn son and the firstborn of all the animals. This meant that at the end of that terrible night, all the Egyptian firstborn boys and animals had been killed. However, all the firstborn children of Israel had been saved as God passed over their doors. To the people of Israel, this became known as the first Passover. Every year since that day, the people of Israel have celebrated the day of Passover and have given thanks that their firstborn had not been killed. The lambs that the people of Israel had killed had taken the place of their firstborn sons. After this terrible night, the Pharaoh, whose firstborn had also been killed, at last let Moses take the people of Israel out of Egypt. They left the land, taking all their belongings with them. They had been in Egypt for hundreds of years, and now they were free. And so Moses led them out of Egypt into the wilderness. As soon as they were gone, however, Pharaoh again hardened his heart against the people of Israel, and he followed them to bring them back. The people of Israel had just reached the Red Sea, and God gave Moses the power to part the waters of the Red Sea so that all the people could pass through the sea on dry land. As soon as they were all over, the waters closed again so that Pharaoh and all the Egyptian soldiers following them were drowned in the sea. The people of Israel were saved and were at last free from the bondage of Egypt. They had reached the wilderness and they were no longer slaves. They were so joyful that they all sang a wonderful song and they praised God together, and God looked down upon them and was pleased with his people, the people of Israel.